Hey, what's up everybody? In this video, we're gonna be doing a first ride on road and highway test of this beautiful 2018 Ducati Panigale V4s. So let's jump into it. Hey everybody, so here we are aboard the 2018 Panigale V4s. I'm going to be doing just a quick first ride review on this bike, talking about how it feels for riding around town. We're going to jump on the freeway real quick and just get a feel for it in a street and on highway use application. So a little bit of background on the Panigale V4s. This bike came out brand new in 2018 and it replaced the Panigale 1299 Superbike. And it was a really big deal for Ducati because for the very first time in the history of the company, they switched their Superbike platform from a 90-degree L-twin 2-cylinder motor to what is in this bike a 90-degree V4 motor or 4-cylinder motor. And it was a major change for Ducati when they did that. So Ducati's always been known for having big 2-cylinder, big twin motorcycles for their sport bike series. Before the Panigale V4s, there was the 1299 Panigale, which was a 205 horsepower, nearly 100 foot-pound of torque, 1300cc beast of a motorcycle. Before the 1299 Panigale, there was the 1199 Panigale, which was very similar to the 1299, but had a 1200cc engine displacement, 195 peak horsepower, again near 100 foot-pounds of torque, a really grunty, powerful machine. And those existed from 2012 to 2017. Before the 1199 Panigale, before the 1299 Panigale, Ducati used the Tesla Stretta motor in their 1198 Superbike, which was their big Superbike at the time, and that utilized a longer stroke, narrower bore, longer stroke motor that was really difficult to ride. It was like an absolute beast to try to ride on the street. It really didn't want to go below 20 miles per hour, and when you just looked at the throttle or breathed on the gas, you were cranking a wheelie or spinning up your rear tire. It was nearly unrideable. Like, the thing was honestly unsafe even for like an intermediate rider. Like, it was a beast. And that was, again, a 1200cc twin. The bike before that was the 1098 Superbike, which very similar to the 1198, a very angry, beastie, torquey machine. So you're seeing a common theme here. Basically, Ducati has, the last 20 years, been coming out with big 2-cylinder, torquey, twin, angry sport bikes that were really fun and really visceral and really just angry motorcycles. But to be honest, they were really difficult to ride, to the point where it was hard to enjoy them safely, and it was even harder to push them to the performance potentials that they had for an everyday rider. And to me, that's what the biggest thing about the 2018 V4s transition did to Ducati, is it stepped away from this beast-like, super difficult to ride 2-cylinder torquey monster and gave you a smoother power delivery with more manageable low and mid-range, and basically altogether a bike that's just way easier to ride on the street. Ducati made a major shift away from their twin motors to the V4 motor. They've got in this bike an 1103cc Desmo Sedici Stradale motor. So the Desmo Sedici Stradale motor makes peak horsepower figures of 214 horsepower to the rear wheel, and it has a maximum rev limit of 14,500 RPM in first through fifth gear, but in sixth gear the rev limit increases to 15,000 RPM, which, if you look around at other inline 4-cylinder bikes, any big displacement superbike, you're not going to see any of them have a rev limit as high as this, that 15,000 rev limit. And it's absolutely astounding because the engine is moving so rapidly at those high RPMs. And really, it's a testament to the Desmo motor that this bike has, that it can handle those really, really high RPMs, where like a motorcycle that uses springs to return the valves wouldn't be able to handle such a high RPM rev limit. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but that's the big reason why this bike's able to do that, and other inline four-cylinder Japanese bikes, for instance, do not. Another really cool characteristic about the Desmo Sedici Stradale motor is that it has a reverse rotating crankshaft. And what that means is that while the wheels on this motorcycle move in a forward rotation or normal rotation direction, the crankshaft moves reverse or backwards, opposite of the wheels. And what it does is that gyroscopic force from the engine spinning backwards cancels out the gyroscopic force of the wheels spinning forward, and that allows the bike to be super nimble when you're going to change directions. You have got a wheel set that are forged Marchesini wheels, super light and super strong wheel set on this bike, which reduces the unsprung weight of the motorcycle and gives it really good performance. So the suspension on this motorcycle is a fully electronic active suspension system from Öhlins. And what it does is, depending on the riding mode that you're in and the way that you're riding the bike, it's going to smooth out your ride. And it's an event-based system. So if I get on the gas really hard, the suspension in the rear feels the event of the compression of the rear shock and adjusts to stiffen the rear shock in a way that it prevents the bike from wanting to squat down on the rear. Now, if I grab a bunch of brakes, the front suspension feels the event of that front brake, squishing the front suspension, and immediately tightens up the front suspension so that you don't get hard front end dive. Moving on from that, the bike has a really, really, really powerful set of front brakes. This was the first production motorcycle to have Brembo's current and best version of their monoblock brake calipers, the Stylema monoblocks. So that's your whole front end, that's your suspension, your wheel set, your braking. Let's take a look at this beautiful 5.5-inch TFT LCD display here. It is a very high resolution, high refresh rate LCD display. And just take a look at the red RPM line hovering around 1500 RPM, and watch as I burp the throttle, the way the animation is on that needle. It's just so cool. Very, very high-end LCD display on this bike. We're going to jump on the freeway real quick and do some freeway testing on the bike. And in that case, I'm going to put it into race mode, close throttle. So now we are in the race riding mode, which is going to have increased the horsepower quite a bit. And I'm going to drop it in the second gear and just give it a little go. Holy moly. I have forgotten how fast 214 horsepower is. My God. It is incredible. It just feels like you're being warped ahead. Like you don't even feel like you've traveled. You feel like you've just disappeared from your location and then reappeared further up. So as I mentioned, you've got these three different riding modes, the race, sport, and street modes that have different horsepower and different electronic rider edit settings, but that's just kind of the first layer of how the electronics in this bike function. Besides those riding modes, you have the ability to shift both up and down on this bike without using the clutch because of an electronic quick shifter that is so high-tech. It not only allows you to do quick shifting for upshifts and downshifts, but it's able to sense the lean angle of the motorcycle and apply the quick shifter in a different speed so that it's optimized for the lean angle that you're at on the motorcycle when you go for that quick shift. And that's all because this bike uses a dual Bosch IMU system. And an IMU is like totally complicated jargon, which means basically an accelerometer. Like your cell phone, when you hold it, it can sense when you're tilting it in different directions. This one has two of those, one at the front of the bike and one at the rear, which is able to give you the electronic systems on the bike an idea of all these different forces that are going to be acting on the motorcycle, whether you're accelerating and it feels that the bike is being pulled towards the rear, when you're braking and it feels the front suspension loading up, if you're leaning the bike over into a corner, it senses your lean angle from that IMU. And even greater, it can sense when the bike is stepping out. Like if you are in a corner, leaned over, and your rear wheel is starting to break traction and stepping out a little bit, that IMU system can sense that step out, and that's the data it uses to enable the Ducati slide control, which this bike also has. So I mean, these are all incredibly high-tech electronic rider aids that are on their like third or fourth version from Ducati, and they've been so fine-tuned by the point that they're on this bike that like it's unbelievable how high-tech they are. And sometimes I talk about these things and I feel like it's so hard to understand as a rider how this is going to give you value, how it's going to like improve your enjoyment or experience out of riding the bike. And I like to put it in a very simple way, and it's that this bike has all these electronic systems, all these safety rider aids, all these riding modes, wheelie control, slide control, all these things. And the beauty of it is that they all work without the rider having to go in and activate them or fine-tune them or modify them into a way that it suits the riding. Like, all of these systems are active electronic riding systems that just ultimately give the rider more grip, more performance, the ability to accelerate faster, brake harder, and corner better, all without having to do anything. It just makes the bike easier to ride. It makes it easier to perform at an insanely high level. This bike even has an ambient air temperature sensor, and it's telling me right now with that little snow symbol that it's sensing that the outdoor air temperature is below 35 degrees and giving me an ice warning to let me know that there might be black ice on the road. It's a super nice and helpful little reminder there. Let's talk about the ergonomics on this bike, the riding position. It's actually really comfortable by sport bike standards. You've got this front end, these handlebars that are really set wide and they're turned really far out. And so what that does is it allows your upper body and your arms to take on the weight of being leaned over this bike really easily without binding up your wrists. Certain bikes like Yamaha R6 for instance, and even my GSXR 750 have a really tight angle where when you're grabbing the handlebars and having to put weight on the front end, it's not comfortable. The seat, I'm not gonna lie, it's not super plush. It's got a nice grippy Alcantara seat material on it that gives you really good grip, so when you're accelerating hard you're not sliding around on the seat. And the distance from the seat to the foot pegs is relatively, I'd say, in the medium scale of being an aggressive riding position, a tight tucked in position. You don't really feel a tremendous amount of stress on your ankles or knees from the riding position on this bike. It's pretty comfortable. Like, straight up, by sport bike standards, this bike is one of the most comfortable sport bikes you can ride, and I would put it way above bikes like the R1, the BMW S1000, and it's actually, you know, just from the rider triangle, the handlebar to the seat to the foot peg, riding position, it's actually really, really nice. Now, the V4 motor on this bike makes it so smooth to operate when you're riding around town at low speeds. It makes it a really decent street bike, to be honest, especially compared to previous Ducatis. All right, so I'm gonna jump out in front of this guy. The mirrors on this bike are pretty much useless. I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking at my arms, and they are vibrating like crazy, so I can tuck my elbow in and maybe get a glance at something behind me, but they're pretty much on there just for legality reasons, but that's okay. I mean, my rule is that if you're on a sport bike, try to go a little bit faster than everybody else that's on the road, and then you don't have to use your mirrors. It kind of works out great that way. Now this is a completely stock Panigale V4s. It's actually almost new. It has only 811 miles on it, and it has the stock exhaust system, does not have an upgraded exhaust. If you choose to get the full Akrapovic race exhaust system that's offered from Ducati, it bumps that peak horsepower number up from 214 horsepower to 224 horsepower, which is just absolutely unbelievable. Not only that, but you've got a massive weight savings because you're switching from this full steel exhaust system with the catalytic converter to Akrapovic titanium headers and really, really small exhaust canisters that do not have catalytic converters in them. So big weight reduction when you switch to that system. And let's talk about the styling of this motorcycle for a little bit. It is obviously a Panigale. When you look at this motorcycle, when it first came out, it was honestly more like the current generation Superbike, the 1299 Panigale, looks-wise, than it was new. And it is clear that Ducati wanted to carry on this Panigale brand, this Panigale design, marketing image that was such a big success from the 1199 and 1299 and carried on to this bike. All right, we're gonna pull over here and just get some cool shots of this Panigale V4s on this beautiful day. Look at that, the mountain is out. Okay, so first impressions getting off of this bike. My goodness, is it so powerful. 214 horsepower, 1103 cc, 90 degree Ducati Desmo Sedici Stradale V4 motor. I mean, this thing is beyond a rocket ship. It will just warp you ahead on the road. It is so fast. So fast. It is really, really, really nimble too. I mean, you're talking the whole bike itself only weighs about 380 pounds, and you can feel it when you're riding, when you're braking, when you're changing directions, and you're accelerating. It's just super lightweight, super nimble.
Thanks for watching this first ride review on the 2018 Ducati Panigale V4s. I hope you guys liked the video, and make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace.